Welcome to another episode of On the Issues with Alon and Ben-Meir. Today's guest is Agatha Atuhaire, a Ugandan lawyer, journalist, and digital activist. She is the host of Agora Discourse, a digital public square, and has been involved in social media campaigns that have sparked national conversations and policy changes on the poor state of roads, healthcare, and security. Agatha is the 2023 recipient of the EU Human Rights Defenders Award and a 2024 recipient of the U.S. State Department's International Women of Courage Award. In this episode, Alon and Agatha discuss freedom of the press and the situation for journalists in Uganda, including intimidation of journalists, the current political situation in the country, and what steps can be taken, both within the country and by foreign powers, to improve the political and human rights situation for Ugandans.
So we are going to discuss, I suppose, today the plight of journalists in Uganda. And I'd like you to first to give me a little bit of background to our listeners. What was it, say, 15, 20 years ago, and what has changed since?
So the background is that Uganda has had issues with the rights of expression and the freedom of the press before, after independence, because we had dictatorial regimes. As you know, that there has never been a peaceful transfer of power here. Power is taken by force and most times sustained by force.
Right.
So the current government came in power in 1996, and about almost 10 years later came up with the constitution, the 1995 Constitution of Uganda, which really sort of brought about a bit of freedom of the press under Article 29.
I'm sorry, that was what year was that? What year was that?
1995.
1995. That's when the new constitutions were written.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. So it brought up about a bit of rigorous provisions about rights and freedoms. And in Article 29, it provides for freedom of the press, expression, and all. It has many other laws that sort of are supposed to complement that. For example, there's the Access to Information Act, there's the Press and Journalists Act, and all that, which have, I think at first, it was better. I started practicing journalism in 2011. And we have seen that trend where it's increasingly worse than the previous years. You cannot say there's a year where there was absolute freedom of the press, but you can say that it has declined more and more over the years. So the longer this government stays in power, the more regressive it becomes, and the more they clamp down on these freedoms. So it's different now from when I joined the newsroom, for example, in 2011. You were not finding stories being sort of the editors worrying about closures at that time, fearing to publish certain stories because they are worried about closure. But then in 2013, there was closure of two main newspapers because they had published a story about the plan for President Museveni to install his son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, as the president after him. I think, there was a letter they published that was talking about the Muhoozi project. And both the Daily Monitor and the Red Paper were shut down for a long time.
Is it because they were critical of the government in any way?
Yes, but in particular because they had published a story that talked of that Muhoozi project I've told you about, the plan to have the first son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, succeed his father.
I see. So now you are there, and obviously you are talking freely. Do you feel you can say whatever you want to say on this particular program, for example?
Yes, it's chances we take every day. I'm not free per se, but we still continue to talk about it, to say the truth. Yeah.
But what's, obviously, there is really pretty much international trend with the rise of authoritarianism and with the extreme right wings in many, many different countries, even in European countries like Hungary, like Poland, in the Middle East, notwithstanding, of course. So it is not necessarily, it's not really unique. Like Turkey is another terrible example. It's not necessarily unique to Uganda, but the circumstances in each country are somewhat different in terms of the approach to the freedom of press. And so what do you expect now to happen? That is, you said that the trend has been down. That is, the pressure on the freedom of press been increasing lately. In which way did they do so? What method do they use in order to increase the pressure on journalists and on the social media?
So many ways. They have so many ways at their disposal. And so the first one is intimidation of both the media houses and the individual journalists. So the media houses are threatened with closure, like I've told you, but are also threatened with denial of adverts. So advertisement is still the biggest source of revenue for media houses.
Right.
There's a
And so
time
how do they stop advertising? What do they do to stop it? I mean, they are not advertising.
Because
companies are advertising.
The biggest advertiser in this country is government. It's the biggest advertiser. But also, even the private companies, if they think that government has a problem with you, they shun you, they avoid dealing with you. Because even them, most of their business comes from government.
So what kind of advertising does this government do? I mean, the various governments, what sort of advertising? Do they advertise programs, issues? What it is that's particularly, I mean, usually in the United States and freer countries, you have firms, all kinds of businesses, products, name it. That's what they advertise. The government does not really advertise what it's doing. This is in the news. This is being carried out. But what kind of advertisement the government, in fact, does there?
Let me see. I think I have a newspaper here. It would be nice to show you. But first of all, government is always getting special newspapers for days that are supposed to be celebrated, like independence, like Liberation Day, the National Resistance Movement Day, the day that this current government took power. Then you have, these agencies, the government agencies that advertise jobs, Uganda Revenue Authority, Uganda National, they advertise bids, jobs, so many things. There's so many things.
I see.
But there are also what is called supplements. So where government has like 10 pages where it is, trying to do PR to explain. I mean, by government, I mean ministries, departments, and agencies.
So then the media is becoming really a tool by the hands of the government to a great extent.
Yes.
And so what it is there any effort? For example, you are a journalist. Obviously, you seek to say what you want to say and express your feelings about various subjects, and you obviously feel constrained. Am I right? You feel constrained.
Yes.
And how do you see the prospect? Is it changing? I mean, this government has been in power, as you say, since 1996.
Yep.
So this is
1986, for 38 years now.
8 years now. And is there an election in Uganda?
Yes,
do they have an election?
We do elections. We have elections after 5 years.
Every 5 years.
Yes.
And this government been now voted for the second term.
Yes, the elections are not free and fair, and courts have pronounced themselves on that. I think out of the the 6 elections that we've had since 1996, 3 have been disputed in courts of law, in the highest court here, the Supreme Court, and two have been said, actually 4. Even the 2021 election was disputed, but the presidential election petition was withdrawn. So 4 out of the 6 elections, would that be 6 elections that we've had? Yes, have been disputed.
So this government, the current government, which has been 8 years in power, this is a new government?
38 years. 38 years.
38 years in power.
Yes, since 1986.
Consecutively. Oh my goodness, I see. So basically you're saying the election is always rigged. That's what you're saying.
Yes, we had the first election under this government in 1996. That's 10 years after it had come to power. So the first 10 years is the only time there was no election. And they were saying they were stabilizing the country because of the turmoil that had been there.
So when there is an election, do they have a campaign? Do they campaign?
Yes.
So,
President Museveni campaign.
And these campaigns, what kind of promises they make? Specifically, say in connection, do they speak about freedom of press? And what kind of campaigning they do? And how does that relate or may not relate to freedom of press?
The campaigning is always that the previous governments were worse, that they have provided freedom of the press that wasn't provided before. So they are always comparing themselves with the worst, with the previous governments, which they say now your freedom is guaranteed. No one is killing you because you've expressed your opinion or taking you to jail. And that's what they say about freedom of the press, because before President Museveni came to power, there was no privately owned media.
I see.
Yes. But now there are so many radio stations, TV stations, newspapers, so they talk about that achievement.
So now you have more media in terms of radio, television, of course, social media. But then, although this is a plethora of this, it is expanding. So so the media outlets are expanding, but of course, the government also needs to expand its own quote unquote control. So, given that the expansion of the media, is it allowing a little bit more freedom than say a few years back? I mean, because of the expansion, because of so many different outlets.
So that's hard to explain because the entity that gives the license, that issues the license, is under the grip of the government as well. It's the Uganda Communications Commission.
Right.
And sometimes it recalls the license. So although they are more now than they were in 1986, they do not have the freedom. I have appeared on talk shows where the host is always worried that they are going to get a call from the Uganda Communications Commission because of what I have said. So there's that fear. They want to toe the line so that they retain the license.
I see.
I was trying to count for you the many ways in which the government has increased that pressure. So that is also one of them. We have had instances where the Uganda Communications Commission has written to a media house and even demanded that they terminate the services of individual journalists. So that's one of the ways. The other way is that individual journalists are intimidated, are arrested, are beaten. So in many of these political rallies, journalists are targeted. There's a journalist that was shot in the head during the campaigns. Maybe it was a rubber bullet because thankfully he did not die, but he had to flee the country after that. So many were beaten, so many were shot. In 2021, after the elections, when the former presidential candidate Bobby Wine was taking a complaint to the UN Human Rights Office, the journalists that were going to cover that were beaten. They ended up in hospitals. Yeah, so there's brutality, there's the arrests and illegal detentions, there's losing their jobs because sometimes they call. I think what I didn't tell you is that of the many radio stations that we have, 90% of them are owned by politicians.
I see.
And they are owned by national resistance movement politicians, the party that is in power.
Uh-huh.
So if a journalist insists on doing what they are supposed to do that the government is not comfortable with, those journalists are fired from the jobs. They are dismissed. Yes.
I tell me, I mean, you received the State Department Freedom Award, obviously for something that you have done. Can you tell me what it is that you have specifically done in order to, obviously you deserve that award, and I want to congratulate you for that. Urbana speaks so highly of you.
Thank you.
I'm glad she made it possible for us to finally get together on this. And I want to, I mean, right now you're saying certain things that probably some officials don't like what you're saying.
Yep.
But you're saying it anyway.
Yes.
Are you concerned at all?
So much, very much concerned. As we speak, I am in the process of filing a complaint with the intelligence arm of the National Army, the Uganda People's Defense Forces, where two individuals approached my elder sister and told her that if I don't stop antagonizing government, they are going to kill me.
But nevertheless, you're still doing that. Why are you doing that?
Yes. So it's never because you're not afraid. It's because you don't see any other option. I have not told you even quarter of the things that are going wrong in this country. We've just talked about freedom of the press, but the deaths, avoidable deaths of people. Currently, we are dealing with an incident where garbage fell on people's houses and killed them. And these are about 100 people that died. And there's no one that is being held accountable for that. Now, when things like that are happening, when people are dying in hospital because there's no medicine, there's no doctor, I don't think keeping quiet is an option. I think we need to speak up and see if that improves the affairs of this country. So that's why I do it nevertheless. I mean, regardless of the threats, regardless of all the efforts to silence everyone.
I mean, of course, I mean, it's not an effort to me because you would think that a government that can actually treat the people well, deal with their issues, their problem, economic conditions, environment, housing, and all of that would be more popular. Why do they have to resort to this kind of methods to oppress the people? I mean, but it is there. This is obviously a means by which the rulers maintain control. They don't want any opposition, and they convey any kind of opposition usually is the press.
Yep.
And you know, and that is an endemic. It's just about everywhere, and it's I mean, obviously, I'm not surprised about what you are just saying. I'm just I really admire you for your courage to be able to speak about these things openly, and I hope you know those government who are listening or want to listen to what you are saying, they should look at it in terms as a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. This is why don't you do better? You know, why don't you allow for people to be able to say what they feel, but do something about it. Do something about it instead of clavering on them, instead of arresting them, instead of intimidating them. or even killing them. There's opportunity for you to be more constructive. But then this is from time immemorial. This has been the case, oppression, and that is I'm a writer. I write every week. Obviously, I cannot imagine myself feeling that I cannot say what I want to say.
Yeah.
I just cannot imagine it. And I say what I want to say, and many times I'm getting intense criticism. But the threat never came from this country. The threat usually comes from the countries that for example, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I get threats from Israelis because they don't like what I'm saying. I get threatened by Palestinians that they don't like what I'm saying, but never from people within this country. So it is sad phenomenon. But I wanted to ask you what it is you feel that can be done from other than having this courage, which is so admirable on your part. What else can be done other than voicing your concern and describing this terrible phenomenon in the country, like so many others? What it is in your view can be done constructively without necessarily challenging the government? I mean, is there a method by which you can use?
I don't think anything can be done without necessarily challenging the government, because like you said, if it was a government that listens to these issues, where you say there's a problem here that has caused this and this suffering to the citizens of this country, and they at least attempt to resolve it. But what happens instead is that we are the ones that are persecuted. I and the team I work with, we expose corrupt politicians, we expose corruption. The corrupt politicians stay at large, and the people that are arrested are the people that have spoken against that. There are many that have been arrested because they have dared to speak up against corruption. So I think what can happen is for a really significant percentage of Ugandans to all rise up. It shouldn't be one or two or three people that are speaking up against this. I think the more the number of people raising these issues and putting pressure against this government, but also in terms of voting patterns to make sure that you vote out the politicians that are corrupt, that are not doing what they are supposed to do. When it comes to the president, who it has been obviously impossible to vote him out, we need institutions that work. The cases, the presidential election petitions I've told you about, they end up in the judiciary that is also under the grip of the executive, because the president is the one that has the final say on who is appointed judge or justice of the Supreme Court. And he has been appointing cadres of his party. So if we had institutions that work, so yeah, I think the solution is only in all the citizens demanding for answers, demanding for accountability, but also taking their power in terms of, if you're not accountable, you're not going to remain our leader.
So in what form you're saying all the citizens, in what form is this being expressed? That is what the people want. What is taken? Is it their demonstration? Is it the protest? Is it writing to the government? In what form the people are actually trying to make a change? What methods are they using?
I think they are trying, different people are trying different methods. You have those that are writing in all forms of media. You have those that are actually protesting. The young people had demonstrations last month. You have those that are using social media, the only platform that is not highly controlled. by the state. Yeah, so many are doing it in all sorts of ways, but well, not many, not enough to exert the pressure required for the leaders to listen.
I mean, obviously, like the old saying goes, power corrupt. And when the government is in power for these many years, almost 4 decades, that is a given. So, and when they wrote the new constitution, did they establish a term limit, for example, that the president can be elected only 2 or 3 times, or there's no term limit?
Yes, there were term limits. 2 terms, 2 5-year terms were what was provided for in the constitution, but the constitution was amended in 2004 to 2005, I think, to abolish them.
So they changed the rules.
So they changed the rules twice.
So the leaders can be elected and re-elected indefinitely.
So that President Museveni can be elected again and again. There was also a provision on age. There's an upper limit on age of 75 years, which was also amended, removed in 2017. So there's no limit now.
I mean, this is obviously not new, because look at Turkey, for example. Erdogan has been in power for 22 years now. And it is presumably a democracy, but the problem is when you don't have a term limit,
Yes.
election and no election, especially if you can control the election or rig the election. So that is one of the sources, one of the bigger problems that actually perpetuate corruption provides, and the leaders want to hold on to power. So where do you see the path forward with this? You're saying, basically the government is not interested in making any significant reform to change this environment. But how hopeful are you, being there, that change can happen? And in which form can that happen?
To be honest, I'm not very hopeful. So the change that we are expecting is it doesn't give us any hope. Is that President Museveni will die in power, and I don't know what will happen after that. It might be more chaotic than it has been, because there'll be a fight for power. President Museveni is over 80 years old now. So I think everyone thinks that the easiest or quickest way, or the soonest we'll see change, is after his death, because he's very determined to die in power. And he has such a grip on it that it's really difficult to challenge, in terms of, like I said, all the institutions are under his control, the army, the judiciary, parliament, which, as you've heard, has amended the constitution twice to suit him. So
I see.
So there's not much hope. There's just, trying what you can to sort of instigate incremental change that will maybe eventually, I don't know, even that one, I'm not very hopeful. I'm just trying not to sit and fold my arms as things are going wrong.
No, of course I understand that. Is he now sort of preparing someone, a successor, to make sure
his son.
His son.
His
so
son,
basically, it's become like a royalty.
His son is the current army commander. Is the commander-in-chief of UPDF.
Of the military.
Of the military. Yes.
Okay, so he's a commander, and he would be, in a way, naturally want the person to inherit his father's position.
No, legally it should have been the vice president.
There will be an election.
Let's say something happens.
But let's say the father passes away, and there's going to be a new election, and
So
obviously,
if the father passes away, the constitution provides for the vice president holding that position for 6 months
I see,
until an election is held.
I see. And then when the new election is held, probably the same thing is going to happen. I mean, I'm
Well,
trying to understand when you say you're not hopeful. Obviously, there's no prospect of major change at the top, regardless whether the current president is in power or not. That is because he's already established a framework that is not allowing for significant change, even after he passes away. Aren't you saying that?
yes. So even if he were to die right now, the vice president is not very powerful. It's as if it's a ceremonial, although it is provided for in the law. It's sort of ceremonial, but also the president puts there someone that has no that is weak, that they can control. So even in those 6 months, it would be the army that is running the show.
I see.
And it would be the army that determines who is elected. Because even now, elections in this country are a military affair. There's always military all over the place. So yeah, so that's what makes one not very hopeful.
Right. And one other question in terms of the style of writing. Of course, there's, for example, you mentioned if you write about corruption, you could be harassed, you could be intimidated, you could be jailed. Is there, for example, when you write? I mean, for example, I write and I criticize something, but I try to also offer a solution, that is, advocate a certain solution. Do you see advocacy like this taking place by journalists in Gaza, in Uganda, other than, I mean, there's one thing is to criticize. You can write an article criticizing something that is wrong. On the other hand, you can criticize it and offer some kind of constructive solution to that. Do you see that's happening? That is other
Yes,
than just that. Can you
yes.
give me an example from your own experience?
I think the commentary that you see from many of the politicians, some retired who were with the president, or the politicians currently, is calling for a peaceful transition, peaceful transfer of power. They have called for the reinstatement of term limits. They have called for the president to, step down or not seek re-election or allow for free and fair elections. So people have always, sort of made those suggestions, but they are ignored. There's always a call for free and fair elections all the time. In 2016, after the election of 2016, the Supreme Court even gave guidelines, though I don't know if they are guidelines or something stronger, about how we can achieve free and fair elections and avoid these challenges on the elections every election year. But they are ignored. For example, the incumbent using his incumbency to lock every other candidate out of the media. In 2021, other candidates were not allowed to campaign because under the pretext of COVID-19 SOPs, but the president was campaigning. So all these suggestions have been there, but they are ignored. There's no incentive to follow them, or no disincentive to not following them.
So nevertheless, you're still doing what you're doing.
Yes.
And basically hoping against hope. So why are you still doing that, even though you feel it is basically hopeless? I mean, I want to tell you, I'm in a way in the same situation, but not necessarily about this country, in the issues I deal with. And people say to me, after all these years, why can't you give up? Nothing is going to change. And I say, well, look, if I give up, then what? Obviously, even it becomes even worse. At least there's a voices. Is that how you feel about it yourself? There's a voice there, even though it may be hopeless.
You know, not giving up comes with just a bit of hope, even if it's slim, but even if the chance is 0.5%, you want to take that chance. But giving up, you don't have any chance if you give up. Even that slim chance is not there. But like I said, the other reason is that I'd like to know that things went wrong, but I played my part. I played a role in trying to make them better, even if I failed, but I did my best. I didn't sit and watch things go under. So I have a defense for myself. Maybe I do that to have a defense for myself, to sleep better at night. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, honestly, I cannot agree with you more. In the final analysis, we have to have a purpose in life, and there is no greater goal, no greater purpose than making an effort to improve the life of people who are under pressure, that are suffering, and that's extraordinarily admirable on your part. I just want to ask you one other question in terms of outside pressure. Is there any pressure coming, say, from freer countries who are dealing with COVID, like the United States? Are there any pressure on the government to improve the situation, or no, nothing like that is happening?
Yes, there is some pressure from there's some external pressure, not enough, not as much as would like. But I think that the U.S. government is the one that has been putting more pressure of late. For example, they have recalled funding or redirected it. They are not funding government directly, but trying to fund civil society organizations or these other organizations that deal with, for example, PEPFAR, in trying to get HIV patients to stay on the treatment, which is really majorly by the US government. You've heard about the dismissal of Uganda from AGOA. So it has increased pressure, put out some statements when rights are violated, or called upon the government to respect human rights. But yeah, it's just a bit of it.
Yeah, but there are no, for example, the United States has not imposed any sanctions that I know.
Oh, no, there are also sanctions. I'd forgotten that.
There are some sanctions.
Yeah, the British government sanctioned the Speaker of Parliament and 2 ministers in May this year, and the US government also followed suit and also sanctioned the Speaker and a couple of other government officials. I think in May as well, either 30th, yes. So there have been some sanctions on some individuals.
And is it making any difference? Is it making even slightly?
It hasn't made any difference, because up to now, the government has never started any process of prosecuting these corrupt officials.
Well, I'm sorry to hear all of this. I just finally, I just want to ask you: is there anything else you would like to say that I haven't dwelled on or asked you for? Yeah, ask you about that you'd like to impart with our listeners?
Well, I think ultimately the task to change what's happening in this country, the burden is on the people of this country, the citizens of this country mainly. But I think that the international community also has a role to play. In as far as the question that is normally asked is, these countries, especially the European Union and the US government, fund Uganda's budget, almost 50% of it. why wouldn't you support our efforts to demand for accountability for that, for those funds, for example? Why wouldn't you say, if you do not account for this money, we are not going to fund anymore? The military, which has become a problem for Uganda, which is involved in each and everything, move out the streets here, and every 100 meters there's military. It's funded mainly by these external, it's externally funded. Why would you continue funding the military to those levels when Uganda is not at war? You know, so
Yeah.
there's some questions that would like the people that have more power than we do,
Right.
because the citizens don't have that much power in this country. But those that they can listen to, because they know there's something to lose if we don't listen to them, would have appreciated it if they did more.
Right. So you're saying, obviously, and I agree with you, more pressure could be exerted by the
Yes,
EU,
yes.
the United States,
Yes.
certainly the sale of weapons. I'm sure they're also purchasing weapons from the outside and not manufacturing them inside Uganda.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially the heavy
That too.
equipment. And that is money
That-
that could be spent on the economy, on social services, on school, education, universities. And well, I hope even, something as, this kind of podcast even helps in a tiny bit in one form or another. I want to congratulate you again for your achievement, for your courage, really. I think it's
Thank you.
remarkable that you are talking about this and doing something about it, regardless of what the prospect might be. So keep it up. All the power to you. All the power to you.
Thank you.
And thank you again
Thank you very
for
much.
taking the time. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you for listening to this episode on the issues. You can find this podcast on my SoundCloud page, and stay tuned to my social media accounts for the latest analysis and announcements.